This is Leigh, and I'm with Open Studio. Today I'm going to walk you through our hip pack. First, you're going to need all your pieces and parts. I've already got these cut out, and I'm going to lay them here so you can see exactly what you're going to be working with. You can choose to do an 1.5 inch belt or 1 inch. We went for an 1.5 inch here. Scissors and snips are your best friends. I didn't have a zipper that was the right length, which was 12 inches, so being frugal, I decided to work with one I did have, which was a little bit longer. I used really bad craft scissors to cut that metal teeth, and then nippers here, as you can see, you just cut through the metal teeth until you get down to the length that you marked from your ruler. Next, we're going to sew our end tabs, which will hold our webbing. So it can get a little bit bulky. So usually I'll start without the webbing. I sew a nice straight line and then pivot and then insert the webbing and do the stitch across everything. It might take some fiddling to get your webbing nice and straight, and then you're going to pivot again. We are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance everywhere on this pattern. You still need to trim down those corners, and when you go to turn it, it's a little bit bulky. I was working with a 10-ounce canvas and then this cotton webbing, which is quite thick. So I use a bone folder, another favorite tool of mine, to get in the corners, and then you're able to come back and top stitch. You're going to repeat this for the other side, and then you'll end up with 2 nice end pieces that hold your webbing. So the next thing you're going to do is prep your zipper. So to make this a really nice clean finish, we are going to sew our end pieces onto each end of the zipper. I did trim down this end. You don't have to trim that down. I was just trying to make it easier for you to see that 1/4 inch seam allowance there. So we're going to place the tab on the zipper and then stitch. You'll see my foot that I'm using on my machine is actually part of a walking foot situation on this home machine, which is pretty amazing. Your machine may not go over that zipper, so you will probably need to change to a zipper foot to do most of this work with the zipper. You do want to get as close to the zipper as you can when you're doing this. And then we're going to put a nice closed top stitch right beside the zipper. Then you'll go to the other end, and this one's a little trickier because your pull is there, so it's open. So I kind of hold those together as I'm sewing them. You'll notice I don't use a lot of pins when I'm sewing. They kind of annoy me. So I use them if I have to, but again, you'll see this stitch, I'm going right over that, and because this foot moves right over those teeth, it's not a problem. Then we open it up. I use a lot of finger pressing when I'm working with canvas, so I use my fingers to press it instead of using an iron. So now we've got our zipper prepped, and we'll move on to the next step where we're going to install the zipper in the top part of the back. So here's this long piece, and it's gonna go right on top of that zipper. So we're going to do right sides together and then stitch that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. One thing that I did not do here, which I should have done, and I realized I hadn't done it too late, was to go ahead and clean finish that edge of that fabric that is attached to my zipper. So that could be binding, but that could get a little bit thick. So really a serge would probably be your best bet here. If you have a serger, clean finish that before you attach your zipper. Now, because I am top stitching this, it's going to hold all that together, and this is not something that's actually going to get washed a lot, probably not like a garment, so I'm not too worried about it actually not being serged, because it is going to get held down, which you'll see in just a second. Again, I'm using my fingers here to press all that really nice and flat before I do my top stitching. And then just make sure you move your pull out of the way as you get close to it, because it'll give you a wobble on your top stitching. And so you've got a nice flat stitch going all the way down the zipper. Now the next thing I'm going to do is the body of the bag. Is I need to sew these you might call them a dart, but it's a corner kind of box pleat that's going to give volume to the bag. So this is just 1/4 inch, sewing both sides of those boxes together, as you can see here. After stitching these, then you go serge those raw edges. And you can see this gives some nice volume to the bag. You can see here it gives a really nice volume. I'm going to go over to the serger and go ahead and serge both of these pieces that I just sewed together. So I just wanted to show you on this red bag, this is the small hip pack pattern, and this is what the darts look like on the rounded, smaller bag. So we're not going to construct this whole bag because everything else is the same. It's just the way that you sew these darts is a little bit different. So I thought I'd show you on the red bag what they look like. So back to our big bag, we are now going to add the zipper to the body of this bag, sewing again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Move the pull out of the way. Make sure you leave your needle down when you do that, so you can keep a nice straight stitch there. Finger press open and flat, and then we're going to come back and top stitch. Now that the zipper is installed, we're going to work on attaching the curved top flap to the edge. You can see I've got my centers notched, and so just so you know, that's how that's going to match up. I rarely pin these or start with them attached there because it's easier to work around that curve without pins for me. So I will slowly turn the top layer, which is my curved piece, to match the straight. And again, this takes a little finesse, so take your time. I use my hand wheel on the side of my machine if I need to walk it a little bit slower. And then make sure your notches match and continue. Getting to that curve again, it gets a little finicky. And I always feel like it's not gonna match, but it usually does. So now that that's attached, you want to turn it right side out and finger press along that curve so that it's going to lay nice and flat. Again, this will take some pushing with your fingers. I also didn't show, but I did serge this before this top stitching. This is going to give a really nice structure to the top flap of the bag, this top stitching. Just continue to the end. Next, we're going to stay stitch our webbing pieces to the bag, and you can see I started the seam allowance down. There are notches on your pattern for where to place these. You don't want to get these sewn into this top seam allowance, so just make sure you are at that notch, and you're going to stay stitch within the 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I am probably at about 1/8 of an inch here. And then repeat for the other side. I like to pin up my webbing just to kind of keep it tidy. You are going to have all of this stuff hanging out inside of this bag while you stitch it together. So never forget to open your zipper. I've sewn a lot of bags where the zipper was not open, and then I had to figure out how to get into the bag to flip it. So the best place to start sewing on this bag is at the corner. So you want to match up your seam allowance, which is right there where you sewed in your zipper, to that place right above where your webbing end is sewn in. You're going to come down to the point, which is where this dart is sewn. You'll leave your needle down and then pivot around the corner. Again, I'm getting all the webbing and everything out of the way as I'm sewing this, so it can take a little bit of time. You can see I press that seam allowance of the dart to the back once I pivot to get it out of my way. So as you pivot here and stitch, you just want to make sure you're not hitting that webbing. So you can see I'm pushing it out of the way with my fingers, making sure I don't accidentally stitch anything there that should be free. Anytime you sew something with volume to something that's flat, from a 3D to a 2D, it's a little bit tricky, so you just have to take your time, be ready to take out some stitches. And then after it's all stitched together, then you can see I'm here at the serger, making a nice clean finish. This is a really nice place too to do a binding. If you'd like to do a binding, it could be colorful or a pattern binding that you make or buy. It's a really pretty place to add a binding. So there you go. That's what it looks like before you flip it all around. You don't need to trim anything on those corners. It's already just a 1/4 inch, which is one reason that we have a small seam allowance on this pattern. Makes it easy when you go to flip it. Use my fingers a lot here to get things started, and then again with my bone folder, push into all those corners. I'll often use it as well down the seam. Press that seam open a little bit. Finger press. Look at that bag, it's so cute. So now we're going to put the buckles on. Again, we used a plastic buckle here just for ease. It's a really, it's very functional type of buckle. I use these clips here to hold everything together for me, so I can take it to the machine and stitch these both at one go. You want to make sure you line up your buckle right sides up, and then you insert your slider first. This is so your belt can be adjustable. Come through the top, and then you're going to see you have to bring it back through the slider. It's a little bit fussy, but just take a second and get that through. Okay, and that's going to get stitched to that other side of your strap that you have coming through there. Now with the machine, when you go to sew thick webbing, you might have to get your foot on a little bit more. That's what happened right there, is that it wasn't quite on, and so the foot didn't want to go up on the webbing. So start a little bit farther in. You can always back tack. I gave 2 stitches there. And now you can see I'm going to do this one, which is a little bit trickier to sew because you're dealing with a lot of different layers and webbing. But just move everything out of the way. This one's really important that you get as close to the slider as possible. So I do my first 2 stitches, and then you'll see I come back and actually do a third because I want it to be really close to the slider. So you can see here, I decided this was a little bit too much room. So I came back and just added a stitch as close as I could get. You can see I'm even sliding that slider out of my way. Just with this cotton webbing, it can be a little sticky, and so getting it as close to the slider as possible just makes it function a little bit better so that it slides a little easier. I was having a hard time moving it before. So now it's fully adjustable. Trim everything up. And pretty much finished with this bag. There you go. I'll model it for you. It's talking. Good luck. You can find more of our patterns at openstudiopatterns.com.